Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with the foolish Charles Coulombe.
Foolish?
It's April Fool's Day, Charles. It's not an insult.
Let me tell you something. If I'm such a fool, well, I have news.
Really? What?
I have news. You'll be glad to know that this wonderful institution which I'm studying has decided, on the basis of my writings, etc., 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 to promote me to chair of their new department of political science.
Really?
I'm not coming home.
Ever?
Till retirement, 15 years, 20 years.
That's a little rash, don't you think, Charles? You're never coming home?
I don't see that it's rash at all. A regular paycheck, better than anything you guys have ever given me.
Whoa. Okay, let's...
No more living from royalty check to royalty check. Imagine being a faculty man with tenure, able to say anything I want, and everybody's stuck having to listen to me. Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. Yeah. The best part of it is the honorary doctorate that goes along with it. So I'm going to be Dr. Coulombe.
Boy, that was a jump. Boy, you went from to master's to doctorate overnight, practically.
That's true. That's true. And I'll tell you, I probably could never have accomplished it on any other day but this one.
Okay. Wow.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, April Fools. And you called me foolish. You fell for it, smart guy.
What is it your nephew said about your nature? You can only be you on 2 days of the year. It's April Fool's and Halloween, I think it was.
The 2 days of the year when I'm able to be myself. April Fool's Day and Halloween. That's true. And I don't see any jack-o'-lanterns around at the moment. Do you?
No.
No, so I'm left having to give the world what it gives me a steady diet of. Utter garbage.
Whoa.
Time to return the favor.
What happened to turning the other cheek, Charles?
I ran out of them. Cheeks, I mean.
Sad. So what's new?
Well.
What's new? How was your St. Patrick's Day? You filled up on your corned beef?
Oh, I'll say, this is no joke. I invested in 8 kilos of the only corned beef to be had in all Vienna.
Wow.
And let me tell you, we had 3 big pots of corned beef and cabbage and potatoes boiling away. My classmates came through with the potatoes and the carrots and the corned beef. Not the corned beef, the cabbage. And lots of other side dishes, bangers and mash, roasted potatoes, all kinds of other stuff, sweets of different kinds. They became the kitchen crew. Several of them played instruments and sang Irish songs, and there was Guinness and Jameson's galore. I mean, everybody really threw themselves into it. It was a lot of fun, really. I tell you, it was not cheap, the corned beef, but it was worth every penny. Everybody was so happy. Everybody had such a great time, and it really was a lot of fun to watch.
Awesome.
And the best part was that the next day, you see, every Monday we have what's called the common lunch here. We don't really have a cafeteria, but there's a kitchen, and various of the girls will get together and make lunch. The guys, it's usually not 2 together, sometimes. Anyway, but they did exactly what I would do. In other words, there were 2 things. Remember I said there were 3 pots of corned beef and cabbage.
Yeah.
Imagine the stock of 3 pots getting boiled down to half of one. And then that stock being used with all the excess potatoes and cabbage, make a delicious stew the next day. That's what the ladies did. I mean, that's exactly what I would do the day after St. Patrick's Day with the leftover vegetables. Oh, it was so good. I really enjoy being here, frankly. You've got the Latin Rite in both forms. You've got the Byzantine Rite, Syro-Malabar. It's a neat place, I must say.
Yeah. So I hope everyone has been having a very happy and a very holy Lent.
Me too. I have to point something out also, though, and that is that Ren Fair time is coming for those of you in SoCal. April 6th is the first day of the Renaissance Fair. I will not be there, of course, because I'm here.
You're missing it?
I am missing it. It's a funny thing. I'm really having a great time being here and all that, but there are certain things I miss from LA. People, of course, but I also miss the LA Breakfast Club very much. Even though I didn't particularly like getting up early in the morning. Nevertheless, once I got there, I was in heaven. So I miss the Los Angeles Breakfast Club very much. I miss the Renaissance Fair very much. But they've kept me. Both of them have kept me very much abreast of everything going on. This weekend is the last build weekend, Renaissance Fair. So one thing I learned last year as being part of it was that it's the actors that put everything together.
Oh, so you were part of the construction, the building. Everyone's wow.
It's very much a group effort, and of course, by the time it takes several weekends to assemble everything, and by the time you've succeeded, you really become it's very much a cross between old-time summer stock, like my parents used to talk about, and a little bit of carnival. And there are certain customs amongst the players, which I can't reveal, but they go right back to the old days of circuses and carnies. I mean, I recognize them for what they were, and I was laughing myself silly. But no, experience. I mean, it's a great experience just to go there, but it's also a great experience to participate and be a player. And I'm glad I did it last year. I wish, who knows? If I ever do come back to California in the spring, I'm going to do it again.
Of course. Okay, so we're going to continue our Memes and Dreams segment.
You got it.
This week, I came across a hysterical meme from superfan Neil Laurie. And this is the sort of thing, I was thinking about it entire week, and it just made me smile the entire week. I'm going to bring it up on the screen for everyone. Charles, you won't be able to see this, but I showed Charles previously this meme. Oh. Here we go. We got a Trojan. It says me, and then he's trumpeting weird history facts at this poor kid, innocent people. And I thought it was very appropriate to have this on the show because you're basically this Trojan, where like I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for these weird history facts, and like I'm just an innocent bystander. I'm just trying to sleep. I'm just trying to relax, and you're trumpeting these weird history facts at me.
How could you sleep while the Battle of Los Angeles is being fought?
That's a perfect example. The Battle of Los Angeles. That was a completely different question too about I thought Spanish. I forgot who, but that had nothing to do with the Battle of Los Angeles, and you just brought it in to the show.
Well, why not? Would you have heard about the Battle of Los Angeles any other way? Yeah, I didn't think so. And let me tell you something, that battle was the most important ever to occur in the history of planet Earth because the Los Angeles single-handedly held off the combined might of some interstellar empire.
Isn't it nice to think so? I believe that. In my heart of hearts.
You bet.
I'm proud. I'm proud of my...
I'm proud.
My... And I mean, another example, the coffee and croissants from the Battle of Vienna. Where are you going to get that from?
See? I mean, that's a wonderful thing. The next time you're sitting there with your coffee and croissant, you'll know you're celebrating victory of Christianity over Islam.
There you go.
You might be arrested by the thought police, before you get a chance to take a second bite.
Yeah, thought police. Okay. So I thought everyone would enjoy that. It's very much Charles. Okay. Remember, you can send Charles questions through the Contact Us page on our website at tumblerhouse.com. I haven't plugged that in a long time, so I think a lot of people don't know that. You can send it Charles in questions. If you become a Patreon or a patron of Tumbler House through Patreon for as low as $1 a month, chances are I'll ask your questions. So far, we've received only great questions from patrons. So I can proudly say I have asked every single question that every patron has sent us. So, some people are grumpy that I'm not asking their questions. For $1 a month, I'll ask a question. Don't make it esoteric, and don't sort of jam this multi-paragraph opinion into the question, okay? Just, opinions are fine, but just don't make it like this diatribe before you ask a question.
If it's a dumb question, I'll give a dumb answer, so don't worry about that.
There you go. We've asked dumb questions before.
Dumb answers.
Got dumb answers, yeah. Okay, let's see. And again, a lot of people ask, what's that banner behind Charles? That's the Habsburg coat of arms, available on our Teespring store. We have a link to that. On both of our walls is the... you pronounce it, Charles. You pronounce it a lot better than I do.
Sure, the Drapeau Carillon Sacré-Cœur.
There we go.
Which means the Carillon, the flag of Carillon with the Sacred Heart.
There you go. Also available on our store. It's a one-sided wall tapestry. So let's get started, shall we?
Yep.
Okay, now the first question today is from me.
Oh.
All
right. You want to know about the commissary and hiring practices?
Hey.
I have nothing to do with that.
Wow. No, not quite. Not quite. So, we did a short segment on distributism a year ago.
Yes.
But to be honest, I still don't really know that much about it. And so I wanted to do another segment on it, and I wanted to use this segment to learn about what distributism is and what it is not. So first and foremost, again, Charles, could you please tell us what exactly is distributism?
I could. And let me recommend two books which you can get online to read. One by G.K. Chesterton called The Outline of Sanity, and the other by Hilary Belloc called The Servile State. Those are the two Bibles of distributism. Basically, distributism is the idea that in modern society, power has become concentrated in the hands of the very wealthy, political power. Now, I have to make a little explanation here, and that has to do with the difference between power and authority. All right? Important. Power is the ability to make things happen. Authority is the right to say what ought to be done. So in other words, your doctor has the authority to tell you what you should do. You have the power to make it happen. He doesn't have the power, but he has the authority. You have the power, but you don't have the authority. You see?
Okay.
Now, in government, then, in any society, power, of course, is wherever it happens to be. And authority, the legitimate means of determining the direction a society should go, is very often a separate thing. So in the Middle Ages, to give you an example, and it's an important example because distributism gets a lot of its inspiration from the medieval manner of doing things, authority was very much concentrated in the church and in the crown and the king. The king, in fact, derived his legitimacy and his authority ultimately from God. via the church. This was expressed through all sorts of rituals like the coronation and so on. But power was very diffuse. That is, it was divided up in a lot of areas. The church had some, the nobles had some, the cities had some, even the peasants had some. It was all over the place. The good king was like an orchestra leader, and he used his authority to try to get the various powers of the state to operate in something like the cohesion for the sake of a very important phrase, the common good. That's a phrase that has to be borne in mind, the common good. Now, in our society, as Belloc and Chester and other people of that era, authority had become very diffuse, that is to say, amongst the electorate. But power had become very concentrated in the hands of the very wealthy. And this extended to political power. So they were of the belief that the way forward, because this particular setup had led to the rise of Marxism and socialism and things like this, and also to the secularization of society, that they believed the way to combat this was to break up that power once more into smaller bits, and that meant small businesses, small farms, etc., as opposed to large corporations and large agribusinesses. Now, at the time that they were writing, there were a number of countries in Europe that still had something approaching that setup. France, for instance, had a lot of small farmers, and a good chunk of the French population was still on the land. So, I mean, it wasn't as though they were simply looking at the past. They were also looking at things that was still in their day.
Well, yeah, I mean, because the servile state was written in 1913.
1912.
Or 1912, excuse me. And the breakup of Standard Oil, which is John D. Rockefeller's, situation, occurred in 1911.
Yes.
So isn't distributism, I always assumed it was a response to the robber barons during the time.
Well, the equivalent in Europe and England, but yeah. I mean, there was a lot. Teddy Roosevelt, for instance, in this country, or I should say that country, since I'm in Austria, ha, ha, ha. But Teddy Roosevelt was a great crusader against the trusts, as they were called. And these were groups of basically companies that stopped competing with each other. They basically turned their given industry into a closed shop.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of this sort of thing going on at the time. There were a lot of people other than Chesterton and Belloc coming up with similar ideas, usually focusing on different elements of the problem. So you had the guild socialists, who were not really socialists in the sense of Marxists, but they believed in, alongside the corporatists, in organizing labor, capital, and retail of all the different industries and so forth, bring them together in a united body. I mean, there were just all sorts of floating around, and these ideas found some expression in the various papal documents of the time, all the way from Rerum Novarum in the 1880s under Leo XIII to Quadragesimo Anno of Pius XI. And they all called for a lot of the same things: small holdings, small this, small that. Small is beautiful, as Shoemaker said.
Okay. So you mentioned socialism. I guess the big question is, what does distributism in action look like? Like, would Teddy Roosevelt's trust busting the monopolies, is that distributism in action? Is also, obviously, he's using laws, right? He's using American laws. He's using the Clayton Act, the Sherman Act, the Federal Trade Commission Act. These acts were passed to handle these large businesses that had monopolies. Is this distributism in action, or
in a sense?
Okay, in a sense.
In a sense, I mean, the thing I bear in mind about distributism is that, not unlike capitalism, is that it was not really something that people, as opposed to Marxism, that people simply sat down and worked out as the end all and be all to every question. It was a very flexible thing because it was designed to adjust to local conditions, whatever those happen to be. So, for instance, in Nova Scotia, the fishing parishes at Cape Breton organized fishermen. See, basically, what you had going on up there was that you had these fishermen who had their separate boats, and they basically sold their fish for a pittance to the major factories. Well, with a bit of seed money from the church, they organized cooperatives, which started their own Fed and dealt directly with the markets. So they were able to run an end run around the major corporations up there and finding a living wage. So that was an example of distributism in action.
Okay.
They had other schemes like that in different places. The idea being, again, that to the highest degree possible, local businessmen, local industries, local farmers would do as much of their own work as possible. What we call subsidiarity today.
Okay. So are there graduations in distributism? I mean, do I have to want to live on the Shire? Do I have to want to be a farmer in order to be a distributist? No, I don't. No. That's a falsehood.
That's a falsehood. I mean, it's like saying if you want to be a capitalist, you have to be in favor of oppressing the poor.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
I had made an assumption that since there are various types of capitalists, that you don't simply assume that you're a laissez-faire capitalist, right? That so too, you don't simply assume that you're the most hardcore distributist there is, where everyone needs to be living, on farms and doing subsistence agriculture.
No, and in fact, a distributist would say, well, for example, one of the very distributist things that you'll see these days is a thing they call Shop Local Saturday.
Where
you're encouraged.
Love that.
Yeah, well, that's distributism. Where you're encouraged, rather than going to a chain store, to go to your local mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
A lot of what's called the new urbanism, resettling rundown portions of a city and making it bloom again, like what they've done with downtown Cleveland comes to mind. That would be very distributist. So I mean, it's a very difficult thing to describe simply because there's so many different aspects to it. But to say that to be a distributist, you've got to favor, living in the is like saying to be a capitalist, you've got to favor Pittsburgh factories in 1920 and sweatshops with your workers working sundown to sunup. You're
against that?
Yeah, I really am. My great grandfather came down to New England to entertain mill workers. So yeah, I'm pretty much against that.
Okay. Okay. There's still so many more questions that I personally have about distributism and that I've heard elsewhere. So yeah, I've got a list of these. So we'll tackle these one at a time.
Another thing you could consider kind of a distributist thing in its way is the slow food movement.
Oh yeah, you've talked about this before.
Yeah,
I like that. It's hard though.
Me too. Oh, of course, distributism of this sort is very hard. I mean, it can mean going to O'Reilly's corner store instead of going to Walmart.
Yeah.
So yeah, you may have questions in this area further on, but again, it's better for the community that you go to O'Flaherty's. It's certainly easier and cheaper in the immediate Walmart.
Okay.
So you have to make those decisions,
Yeah. Well, actually, for me personally, it's very easy for me to go to a local coffee shop or a burger joint rather than McDonald's or Starbucks. Like I like that.
See, one of the things you've seen all across this great country of ours I love that phrase. All across this great country of ours. What you saw all through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you'd have a mall with various national brands outside of town, and the downtown would go to pot. You know, the businesses will leave. And one of the, again, very distributist things that you're seeing around the country today are all sorts of local initiatives to revitalize their downtowns, which have beautiful architecture, very often have buildings with features, the quality of which we can't reproduce today.
Okay, so this doesn't sound like an alien concept that just a few writers in the early half of the 20th century had. It sounds like this is something that has occurred in our history very much at the top level and continues to, happen to our day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it basically, it's the notion of the economy serving the common good and of at the lowest possible level.
Okay, see, that's one of the questions is, we'll get to it, but that's going to be one of the questions that I feel is important. So, firstly, the first question is, I want to know if I'm a distributist. Okay, so because I feel like a lot of people might have similar opinions. So let's unpack this.
All right.
I'm a guy who thinks there should be laws that favor small business and restrict corporations from artificially becoming huge, through mergers and acquisitions, and thereby gaining monopolies. In other words, I want the legal system to prevent corporations from becoming tyrannical. I want strict enforcement of the antitrust laws on the books, the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, Federal Commission Act. So what does that make me? Is that a version of distributism, or do there need to be other things, more hardcore things that I need to abide by?
Well, I would say that, again, you should try to shop locally, although, as you've indicated, it's easy for you to do.
Yeah.
But the distributist tries to do that. But there's more. I mean, just to give you an example, you look at the tax structure of so many of our northeastern states, which make it virtually impossible for young families to at least start out owning their homes. And again, we've just gone through this terrible debacle of bad loans through the merger of government and finance. What we have is certainly not distributist. It could be called capitalist, I guess. Yeah. But as you said earlier, you'd have to define your terms. It's not laissez-faire. I don't know what you'd call it. Yeah. Crony capitalism? I don't know. What I can tell you, though, is that the distributists would be in favor of laws that favor families, the larger the better, favor the mothers staying home,
Yeah.
These are things that are very, very important to a society. Again, they serve the common good. Now, how we get there from here, that's another story.
Yeah.
Would it be
Yeah, see, that's the big question that seems to be on everyone's mind. Is distributism socialism? Does it need to have a Marxist stage in order to get, as you said before the show, from here to there, wherever there is?
Well, I mean, everyone has that problem. The laissez-faire capitalists have that problem. The libertarians have that problem.
How?
How do we get from here to there? For the libertarian, for instance, he wants to completely shrink the state to a minimum of existence. Okay, that's nice. How are you going to do that? It's not going to be voted in because all the people with entitlements will be against it.
Okay, what about the capitalist?
Well, same problem. If you're a laissez-faire capitalist and you're against government subsidies, you're in favor of a strict free market. How are you going to do that? How are you going to disentangle government from business? At the end of the day, the problem you have is that there is no easy way to get from where we are to where anyone who's not happy with where we are wants to go.
Okay.
There's just no easy way. So if you say, well, you'd have to have a Marxist revolution stage. Well, that would be true no matter what you want to do if it was different from what we've got. I'll give you an example. Let's say something much more much more modest than either distributism, capitalism, or libertarianism. Let's say that you wanted to replace the income tax and all of the intricacies that we're in tax season right now, so I'm sure this is on people's minds. Imagine if all of that was replaced with an across-the-board sales tax.
Okay.
This has been suggested by a lot of people. I didn't make it up. It's not original to me.
Right.
And it could be done in such a way that the government could be supported out of it, literally pennies to the taxpayer, or at the most a few dollars. It would be self-collecting and self-policing, so there'd be no more tax dodging. Sounds like a great idea, doesn't it?
Kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
I have some reservations against it.
There's a big problem, even if you were all for it, even if you thought it was the greatest idea since plaid paint.
What's the problem?
In terms of enacting it, well, you've got the monstrous creature we call the Internal Revenue Service.
Okay.
Think of all the people it employs. Think of all the political clout it has. You would basically be opposing the Internal Revenue Service.
Okay.
That's not a political battle anybody wants to fight.
Okay.
You can't, I mean, to try to fight the Internal Revenue would be political suicide.
Okay.
Now multiply that by all sorts of other problems if you wanted any kind of across-the-board reform.
Okay. I want to talk about, again, the question of there's so many other aspects to is distributism socialism that I want to unpack here.
First, let's define what we mean by socialism.
Okay, what do we mean by socialism? Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's define things.
Socialism, of course, is the idea that the government should own the means of production and that they should administer these means of production for the good of the workers. The people, the class, so-called bourgeoisie, that formerly own the means of production, factories, the farms, and so forth, would be eliminated or end up stuck working on what they used to own.
Okay.
And that is what socialism is. Distributism is the opposite of that. It calls for the widest possible distribution of property amongst the largest number of people. You've got to remember that in socialist states, the government determines policy, etc., and physically owns the factories, the farms, which are usually organized as collectives and whatnot. But and the result, as we saw in the Soviet Union and a lot of other places, has been economic disaster, because the truth of the matter is people simply do not work very hard or with any care for things they don't own or have a stake in. It's called human nature. There was an old joke, and it wasn't a joke. There were warehouses in Siberia filled with thousands upon thousands of left shoes. They hadn't made any right shoes to match them. They just kept on turning out left shoes.
I heard that story.
Yeah. Now, whether or not it's true, it shows up the problem with socialism. But to call distributism socialism, you'd have to give me, it certainly isn't that.
Oh.
It's the opposite of that. So the question has to be, in what sense would you call distributism socialist?
Okay, here's one objection. Okay, distributism works by the government punishing any business as it gets popular and big, cutting it down to size, which would effectively destroy any domestic industry in short order. Now, I'd like to say something regarding that, because,
sure.
Again, the question of distributism in action. When I see that quote, I think of what Teddy Roosevelt did to Standard Oil. And this was it to me. Unless I'm totally missing something, it did not destroy any industry. What happened in the breaking up of Standard Oil is that what was done was it's called a divestiture, which is a sale of the investment, and it was dispersed or distributed among 7 different companies, I believe, and John D. Rockefeller, was not stripped of his wealth. I looked it up actually. His net worth, if you accounted for inflation, in 1913 was equivalent of $600 billion, which is, well, I mean, Jeff Bezos is, I think, around $120 billion. So that gives you an idea of, and because it wasn't about his personal wealth, and it wasn't about wealth at all. It's about spreading out the means of production. Now, again, is this distributism in action? Because to me, it looked like that was a pretty good job, like what we did there.
Well, it certainly looks like it, and I could give you a much more recent thing, and that was the breaking up of Ma Bell.
Yeah, and to the baby bells.
Yeah. I mean, the prices went down. Technology in communications just started zipping.
And I have to say, because I have a neat story attached to this, actually, that in the sale of the company, it's a fair sale. It's a fair price. My grandma actually, she had this old-timey stock certificate of AT&T. And we had this. We had got it out of the closet. We had found it. My dad told me this story, and so they cashed it in, and the result was they got. She had all this ownership, this neat little ownership in 7 different companies, which all did quite well. None of them were like, oh no, you've destroyed our industry because you broke up this company. All of them are doing well, and actually, the daughters now of the so it was broken up into 6 or 7 companies, and those companies now are AT&T, Verizon, and Quest, which are doing great. Also, some backstory of Standard Oil in terms of those companies and the daughters of that breakup. Those companies are now ExxonMobil, Chevron Texaco, BP, and Marathon Oil. I don't know Marathon Oil too well, but I can tell you the rest of those companies are doing pretty well. Actually, I read an investment book, and ExxonMobil is like their stock. They earn an extra 10%, 10% every year. Actually, great investment. So I don't see domestic industry being destroyed while sort of cutting down these monopolies down to size.
No, and of course, the other thing, too, is that if you're going to say, for instance, bearing in mind the agricultural interests, one of the things they very much were against were great estates. Well, I don't know. I think a great estate has a lot to be said for it. But if you can't very well call that by itself socialist unless you want to say the American Revolution was socialist. The reason being that when the war was over, the estates of the loyalists were broken up and given and sold to people. Revolution. Now, you could say, well, we were simply confiscating the property of traders. Well, that sounds a lot like what the Marxists would say about confiscations.
Yeah.
And then the people who had benefited the most from it, the great landowners in New York, like the Van Rensselaers, the Livingstons, and whatnot, in the 1820s, they had their great estates broken up by the courts in New York State. Did that make New York State socialist?
Yes.
Well, okay. All right, so the United States socialist country of George Washington and Patrick Henry. Well, all right, fine. We got that out of the way. It is April Fool's Day. All right, we understand now. The other thing, one of the best examples of land reform I ever saw, which I didn't see it, I wasn't there, but I've ever studied, which I really, really liked, was, believe it or not, on Taiwan.
Oh, okay.
And nationalist China. And this happened in the early 50s, because what happened was that, you may recall that Taiwan itself had been a Japanese colony since 1895. After World War II, China gets it back, and then it becomes the last refuge of the Chinese government. They lose the Civil War. Well, virtually all the factories and that sort of thing in Taiwan had been owned by Japanese. And so they were confiscated by the Chinese government, which now own them. But the land in Taiwan was divided up amongst a few great lands. Well, not a few. They were pretty big estates. Most of them weren't all that profitable, but there they were. They had a problem in that these great estates were not producing a great deal in the way of agricultural products. And they had all of these refugees from mainland China to feed, to say nothing of the locals. So they needed to up their agricultural production. At the same time, they needed to stimulate the lagging industrial economy. So what did they do? Well, it was interesting. In order to stimulate agricultural production, they broke up the estates all right. And the farmers own their own property. And immediately up went the production values in farms on Taiwan. But the landowners, instead of just being expropriated without compensation, were given shares in the formerly government-owned companies, which, remember, had been owned by Japanese, taken by the Chinese. So they keep control of these companies for landlords. Well, the landlords, of course, had a lot of experience in management. And they transferred their experience from managing large farms to managing these corporations. And the result on both sides, both on the industrial end, the agricultural end, was a big boom. You saw the same thing in Japan, when after the Meiji Restoration in 1867, a lot of the Japanese nobility got out of agriculture, usually with some prodding from the government, and got into industry, the so-called zaibatsu. Moreover, in Ireland, and again, I don't think you'd call Japan or nationalist China socialist. Quite the contrary. In Ireland, it was an interesting thing, because as a result of the Battle of the Boyne in 1690, most of Ireland was owned by Protestant landlords with Catholic tenants. And that particular setup didn't do very well during the famine, as you might imagine. Well, they had a brilliant idea, and that was, rather than seizing the property of the landlords, the British government helped subsidize the Irish farmer in buying the land that he worked. These are the famous Wyndham Land Acts. And they had the result of not financially destroying the Anglo-Irish on the one hand, but on the other hand, making the Irish farmer the owner of his own land and pushing agricultural production way up. So, and again, I don't think anybody would have called George Wyndham a socialist, although he was a friend of Belloc.
Okay. Okay, and bear with us, ladies and gentlemen. We have a host of objections. I want to leave no stone unturned here, so bear with us. I might even put timestamps to each sub-question on the summary. So refer to that if we're losing you on any issue, or you're more interested in other questions, because I really want to be thorough and comprehensive on this, because there are so many I think questions and potential objections on so many things. Now, I think the biggest question that makes everyone uncomfortable, we're all wondering about, including myself, is what's the acceptable level, a size of company? See, like, for me personally, I just want to avoid, like, tyranny, as in, like, I want alternatives. Like, for example, like, with this video, if you're not doing it on YouTube, there's kind of nowhere else to go. It's like you can go elsewhere, but you'll get like 5% of the viewers. that's kind of not good, I feel. And so that's a sort of situation that I don't think is ideal. But again, perhaps there are distributists who want everyone to be like a mom and pop type shop, and everything else gets leveled to the ground. Is that ideal distributism, where everything else has to be cleared away?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, the fact is that one of the great aspects of distributism, which was absolutely had to be the case, was its adaptability to local condition, which again was the genius of the medieval system. One size can't fit all. So when you ask what would be an acceptable size, well, it depends upon the business. It depends upon what we're talking about. If you know, it depends upon fair advantage and what's fair. See, and this does bring us back to another issue, and that is once again the common good. Distributism cannot work without there being a basic, broad understanding that the economy, and this is directly from Catholic social teaching, that the economy has to serve the common good first and foremost.
Yeah.
Profits are important. And let me about that. I am very much against the diminution, the diminution of wealth for no reason. Why? Because the wealthy do all sorts of things that we don't think about. Museums, private schools, libraries. There are all sorts of, the arts, historic preservation. There are all kinds of things that cannot be done without a class of people with discretionary income.
Yeah.
It's very important to maintain. I mean, for instance, that's why I'm as distributist as you please, but I'm very much against rent control. Now, why is this? Because if you have rent control, two things are going to happen. Number one, because there'll be no real profit to be made over getting new buildings. People won't build new housing.
Yeah.
Number two, because there's no profit to be made, they're not going to repair existing housing. I've got a very good friend in New York. He and his wife, the same apartment since the 70s. In the village, the Greenwich Village, they pay like $350 a month. I'm saying $350. But if they want any repairs done, they have to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Because other than the bare minimum required by law, the landlord's not going to do anything because it's not really an investment. So, and what does this mean? It means that there's no new housing in that part of New York. It means you can't get, or if you can, it's a piece of garbage that's all outdoors. And of course, as soon as somebody's out of an apartment, they jack the rent up. Now, why am I mentioning all this? Because it goes back to the question of the common good. That's the big thing in distributism.
Yeah.
It would sound at the first blush that rent control might be a distributist thing to do. It's not, because it doesn't serve the common good. Because ultimately it prevents there from being new housing. It prevents existing housing, existing rental housing, from being properly serviced. Now, and also you can compare, if you like, the housing that's rental housing that's privately owned versus governmentally owned housing. And inevitably, governmental housing goes to hell. Why? Because no one's responsible for the upkeep. There's no one to say, put graffiti on your front door and you're out, you're evicted.
Yeah.
See, I mention all these things because we're talking about a huge range of human activities. They're all very, very complex. They're all very intertwined.
Yeah.
And it would be a mistake, I think, to simply take one set of them and say, oh, well, that's distributism, or that's capitalism, or even that's libertarianism.
Okay, let's get to some of these other objections. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see. What policies would you need to implement distributism? I think we sort of covered that. Oh, here's an interesting objection. Distributists will define everything other than the right of possession. It's basically common property. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say that's not true. Okay. Again, distributists tended to be Catholic, and as a result tended to follow the Church's teaching in these things. There is commonality to the goods of the earth. Where do we see this? Where is this expressed? Well, an obvious example is the man who's starving and steals a loaf of bread from the baker. Now, that's not a sin. Why? Because the starving man's right of survival outweighs the baker's right to property. But notice very carefully, his starvation doesn't give him the right to take money out of the till.
Yeah, see, I guess opponents of that would argue it's a snowball effect. Like, where do you draw the line in that? You see?
Well, you use something, and I know it's a thing that's very, very difficult to bring to bear on any of this stuff, but I'll say it anyway. Use something called common sense. And that is to say,
okay.
I know, and it's April Fool's Day, worse yet. Okay. So I know. The very notion of you applying common sense rather than simply being doctrinaire is a little much, but we'll go with it. No, I mean, the fact of the matter is that we already have what is called eminent domain. Now, what is eminent domain? Eminent domain is the idea that for certain first things, the king can take back some of his property to build a lighthouse or a fort or a highway. And the United States, either the feds or the state or somebody, succeeded to the right of the king. And so we still have the law of eminent domain. Nobody disputes that. Now, mind you, distributists would very much be against how eminent domain has been expanded by the Supreme Court. First in the 50s, to allow the cities to condemn huge sections, to take them over and condemn them and knock them down and then do nothing with them. I can't think of anything a distributist would hate more than seeing whole neighborhoods just destroyed. And then the third element, Reno versus New London, which is adopted in the years, whereby the government becomes really the ultimate landlord. You just hold your property in trust until they can find somebody to pay higher taxes on it.
Right. Anybody who pays higher taxes on it, you can be ousted.
Yeah. I mean, there is not a distributist in the world who would not see that as an evil.
I mean,
and it's socialism.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is that socialism? So is that aspect of our country socialist?
Of course it is, because that is I mean, you go from a difference between things that are absolutely essential for the common good and thus overcome your right to property versus the government simply making a quick buck off its peons.
Okay.
There's a difference there.
Okay. Another objection is the notion of a contract, a binding social contract between the government and the people in terms of ownership. You can't redistribute the property. What do you say to that? The notion of contract and how it's a violation of contract.
What's a violation of contract? Distributism?
Yeah.
Well, as we've just seen, I think,
we got some other problems.
That contract had been ripped up and put on the fire. They no distributors around it.
We got some other contract problems.
We roasted marshmallows over that burning contract. I mean, all right, I'm sorry. I've got to put my false teeth back in. They fell out.
Okay, so I guess we have that covered, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. What else you got?
Okay, the questions posed to distributists: what is being distributed, And what's the deal with the use of force in Belloc? Belloc said you have to use force, so like you need a coercive government.
Well, every government is coercive by definition. If it weren't coercive, it wouldn't be a government. That's why people go to jail.
Okay.
Yeah, well, they do.
I don't like to think of the American government as coercive.
No? You ever try counseling outside an abortion mill?
What?
Outside an abortion mill. Think of Operation Rescue. Them folks got themselves put into jail.
Well, that's government looking out for the common good.
Yeah, for the common good of the abortionists. And there's a good example. The distributists would say that the rescue people they were violating the abortuary's right of property for the sake of the infant's right to life.
Okay. So, well, what about the question, what is being distributed?
Well, what is being distributed, of course, are the means of production, land, etc.
If you're distributing, but then isn't that socialism? If you're distributing land, if the government is distributing land?
If it were, then as we said earlier, with the American Revolution, with the 1820 rent wars in New York, with Ma Bell and Standard Oil, we already are a socialist country. So what's the problem?
Sad.
We were socialist from the very beginning.
Sad. What a sad day.
No, the question was asked.
Okay.
Believe me, by the standard of socialism thrown at the distributists, the founding fathers, because they were all of confiscating loyalist property.
Okay, you need to be set straight, Charles, and Thomas Aquinas is going to set you straight. Because
oh boy, not again.
Thomas Aquinas is talking about distributism when he says it's a fundamental corruption of the polity to redistribute property among people and the family.
That's actually not what St. Thomas Aquinas was talking about. You remember, St. Thomas was writing and speaking in the feudal era. Now, what was the basis of feudal ownership? There was a wide distribution of land, of course, with a certain number of great lords. And these great lords were in the position that I mentioned earlier, vis-a-vis the king. Thomas is again the king deciding for political reasons to scoop up a ton of lands, take them from people he opposed, and replace them with his cronies. Such as you saw in the War of the Roses, for that matter, Henry's dissolution of the monasteries. That was the sort of opposing, but that's not what the distributists intend to do.
Okay.
But it's good to know then that if you're going to quote Thomas Aquinas, I guess you're in favor of feudalism, which you're really a distributist. All makes sense if you know how to twist your brain.
Okay, let's get to some of the fun ones. Let's get to some of these fun objections. I like some of these. Distributism is a nostalgia for a period that never existed. Well, that fits perfectly with you. You're the king of the LARPers.
Well, let's stop and think about this for a second, though. The people who are arguing for laissez-faire capitalism obviously aren't arguing for today. They're nostalgics for something. The era of the robber barons.
That's true.
The sweatshops. Pittsburgh belching forth tons of coal out of their pipes. People having to change their collars 3 times a day because the coal dust got them filthy. Is that what they're nostalgic for? And libertarians, they're nostalgic for what? I don't know. A time that never existed. And constitutionalists, what are they nostalgic for? Philadelphia, 38? I mean, come on.
Okay. And also,
they don't like what they have now. If you don't like what you got right now, if you think you've got a better system, I don't care what it is, then you're obviously a nostalgic, you're a LARPer, and you have no business commenting on anything. And that includes me, so there.
The last one I want to do is the most fun one, and it's a long-term gag that I've seen for many years. And yeah, so the gag is that Distributists are sort of portrayed as these Tolkien fanboy LARPers who want to live in the Shire and live the life of a hobbit. Now,
Okay.
wait, I got to speak about personally for me. You know, I'm sure the Shire's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. You know, I'm not really like a farm and livestock kind of guy. I'll take the guided tour of Bag End. I'll have a drink with the gaffer at the Green Dragon Inn. Okay, and maybe, just maybe, I'll drink a little bit of, or not drink. I'll smoke a little bit of Old Toby, and that's good enough for me. I'm done. I'm good. I had the Shire experience.
Well, having spent a lot of time in rural New England and rural Europe and the South, I have been to places that have been rather reminiscent of the Shire, frankly.
Really?
But having said that, I'm a big city boy myself. But I would ask if the opponents of the Distributists, I mean, it's a ridiculous thing to say. The Distributists want to live in the Shire. It's as though the opponents of the Distributists want to live in Pittsburgh in 1920. See the smokestacks belching out the coal smoke, and the infant mortality rate and tuberculosis stalking everywhere in the slums. That's what they're looking for, which would be just as stupid. I highly doubt that any opponent of distributism really wants to live in Pittsburgh in 1920, even in one of those nice houses up on the hill.
You know, you got something against Pittsburgh. Whenever we're talking about this, you know, even for other things, you're always citing Pittsburgh as like the nastiest city there is.
It's not anymore. It's a very beautiful city now.
Okay, well, lay off Pittsburgh, will you? Actually, I don't mind you laying off Pittsburgh because my family, we come from Philadelphia. You know, the nice side of Pennsylvania. Okay, so
you shouldn't be giving me guff.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You know how they define Pennsylvania?
How?
Philadelphia and Pittsburgh separated by Alabama.
What? How does that work? How does that work?
Well, the idea being that between these two big cities, you've got deliverance country.
Yeah, the Amish, I guess, right?
Oh, not just the Amish. I mean, they've got hill people, Scots-Irish types.
Whoa, oh, yeah. Okay, wait a minute. Wait, okay, I have to apologize for Charles because we actually get a lot of people right from there. I apologize to the Luthers, okay, particularly because I know they're right from there. And I apologize to a lot of other customers, Tumblr House customers. Please don't take your business elsewhere because of this man's comments over here, okay? He is no longer an employee of Tumblr House. He's a freelance contractor, okay? So, yeah, okay, just...
All right. Firstly, that's one reason why I'm eating better. Secondly, secondly, some of my very best friends, the Mulls, live in Phillipsburg, PA. I know what I'm talking about. And here's a shout out to the Mulls, by the way, in case any of them are watching. No, I mean Pennsylvania even stole Erie from New York State.
Did it?
Yeah.
Wow.
They wanted to have an outlet on Lake Erie.
Okay, so a
lot of good that did them.
Any last things on distributism? Are we all settled?
Well, I think so. I mean, I have to say though, in light of certain developments over the past week or so, that in the minuscule tempest in a teapot world that is Catholicism, there's been a lot of jumping up and down and shrieking over distributism versus capitalism recently. Don't do that. You know, bear in mind that whatever your point of view and however strongly, number one, you're no more likely to be able to accomplish what you want to do than your opponents are. So it's kind of silly to be slitting each other's throats over it. Secondly, if you claim to hold what you hold in economics, politics, because of your religion, bear in mind that your co-religionists, although they may differ from you politically, questions of science or anything else, they are your co-religionists. And if you could sit down with someone who opposes you completely in economics or in scientific questions or whatever, and the two of you can both recite all four of the creeds and mean them, that's the question.
Yeah.
other things, if we ever get to a point to where Catholicism is such a powerful influence in this country, that these questions become important, objectively speaking, then we can have at it.
Yeah.
But until that day, excommunicating people and above all denigrating their Catholicism because they don't agree with you on political points or economic points or scientific points or questions of fashion is just crazy. And it only benefits the enemy. It doesn't do the faith any good, and it doesn't do your soul any good.
And I personally don't think, maybe I'm totally wrong, but I don't think distributism and capitalism are totally at odds. I think you can incorporate a little bit. I mean, I'm mostly capitalist and a little bit a distributist as sort of a corrective on some of the excesses of capitalism. Is that fair to do, or is that unfair? I can't do that. I have to pick distributism or capitalism.
No, you basically got to live in the Shire in 1920 after Saruman took over.
Oh, man. Oh, after Saruman, yeah, because Saruman's the ultimate distributist, right? He is the distributist. Tolkien, yeah, that's how it was.
Yeah, right? That's right. That's sure.
Yeah.
As far as Tolkien was concerned, he was the ultimate capitalist.
Yeah, because the industry, right? The industry, it mimics the factories and all that.
All that. So
the fires of industry.
So let's not go crazy, ladies and gentlemen. On a note, I'll close my remarks with some advice from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Stay sane inside insanity.
Okay. Okay. Next, question from Paul Creamer. I hope I'm saying that right. Question for Charles. First, I would like to thank both of you for leading me to the church. My question is regarding evangelism. I converted from Protestantism, and the first thing I noticed is no one wants to evangelize. My parish, St. Brendan the Navigator in North Atlanta, is large and growing. However, everyone is a cradle-to-grave Catholic and seem more interested in making a Catholic community for themselves. How can I persuade my parish to put money in evangelism? P.S. All three priests publicly denounce homosexuality in the priesthood and use Latin when it's called for in the Missal.
Oof. Well, things. Is to ask your priests if they would think about doing convert classes. That's kind of an important issue.
What, like RCIA? What is that?
Yeah, that's what they called it before RCIA.
Oh, okay.
You need to look around and see if there's anything like a college or something near your parish, where you might put on talks or something for. These are all things you could do without asking for money. Very important, you see, because people will not want to put money into anything until they see results of some kind, or they see a reason for it. If you have non-Catholic friends, invite them, as many as you can, to things at your parish. In other words, put your money where your mouth is. Get as many non-Catholic friends as you can to come with you to see what you're doing. Because the truth of the matter is that Catholics do not evangelize. We're not a very evangelistic people, which is wrong, but it's what you've got to tease us into doing it. And you've got to come up also with some information. So, for instance, if you go to, let's say you've got a university or a college near your school, and you have a look at what their Catholic programming is, if any, and especially if there's none, substandard, bring it to their attention and be ready to do volunteer work yourself. It's very important. Don't ask anyone to do anything you yourself are not willing to do. Be a leader in that. That's my advice to you.
I'm going to take this opportunity to make a sort of a personal announcement and endorsement. I just joined the Knights of Columbus. I'm a first-degree member. How do you like that, Charles? I'm so happy and proud. I'm jubilant. I'm on cloud 9. because I felt I wasn't truly and fully practicing the Catholic religion, to be honest. Like, my family has always emphasized the spiritual works of mercy, the prayer life and that stuff. But, I wanted to do the other things. I felt I'm lacking. It's an organization dedicated to charity. That's the principle. And admittedly, I am not charitable enough. From the top of the Tumbler House Tower, I just...
Yeah, I was going to say. Well, I've seen you throw a few coins out the window occasionally to the vagrants that throng around the gateway.
But...
and you went to a bun from the executive dining room. I saw you throw that bun down to them.
But I can't. Most of our audience is young Catholic gentlemen. I cannot recommend Knights of Columbus enough for you. Get off this internet. Get off all, because there's so much. People don't treat people like people on the internet, but at the Knights of Columbus, you're going to meet people that will brighten your lives, and will honestly, there's a huge spiritual benefit, the people you're going to be surrounded by. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. And more importantly, because I'm trying to solve the puzzle of how to evangelize. What do people want? What do we need to do? And, because it's not just intellectual discourse, I've decided. It is about having fun in a Catholic context. To me, because it's like old world missionaries, right? They give people what they need, what they're looking for, which back in the day, it was food and shelter. And then on the side, it's Catholicism. In my opinion, what people want most is they want the sense of unity. They want this fellowship. They want this caring. And young people especially want fun. They want these activities. They want social events. And the Knights of Columbus have that in spades. And so I think it's a huge tool for bringing people to the faith.
And part of the problem, too, that turned off a lot of people on just that, is that starting in the 60s, so many of these activities were done without any view to evangelization. And so people of an Orthodox mindset simply got turned off, which is the other extreme, and it's wrong. I mean, there's nothing wrong with programs for youth, programs for women, programs for mothers, programs for men. So long as you always keep first and foremost in your mind that the reason is to strengthen the faith in those who haven't, spread it in those. If you always keep that top, it's like we were talking earlier in economics, the common good. Always keep your eyes focused on that main important reason for being. And if you go astray, you won't go too far.
Okay.
What else we got?
Yeah, so if you guys join on Knights of Columbus, I think, if I remember correctly, like, put my number down that I recruited you. I think I get... Yeah, so, whatever. Just keep that in mind if anybody joins. Okay.
And there's good meals involved as well. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Spaghetti dinners and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we're doing it. Yeah.
Did you do anything for St. Joseph's Day? Ha! And you've got an Italian Catholic Federation bunch right there at Holy Angels.
I need to get more active too, because see, that's one of the reasons I joined Knights of Columbus. I'm glad you mentioned that, Charles, actually, because we need more young people, and it just takes one person. See, because I went to for Lent, the Knights of Columbus of Monrovia do a fish dinner, and it's it makes me so sad because it's all older gentlemen. We need to reinvigorate it with young gentlemen, and it just takes one person working there doing the fish or whatever, and be like, oh, look at this guy. This is an avenue for young gentlemen to enjoy and socialize and have fun. It just takes one person, and that's what I know. I want to do that for my local council, and I encourage everyone else to do that. We need to start joining these old councils. It's such a sad thing that Italian Catholic Federation and Knights of Columbus and these things are just getting older and older, and is dying out.
And they don't have to. Well, and for that matter, the destruction of the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, was a crime.
Right.
But anyway, all right. What else we got?
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't like that indictment on my Italian ethnicity, Charles.
All I know is that somebody didn't go to St. Joseph's Table this year. I'm not pointing fingers. I said somebody. Could have been anybody. It could have been Giovanni, the guy in maintenance.
My parents did that early on. It was for daily mass, but it was too early. That's too much like hard work. I can't do that.
Oh well, never mind.
No, I wish I should have. I should have.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
All right. Next question is from. Oh, let's see here. Yeah, okay. Next question is from Christopher Dittmar. In the past, you have dealt with questions that pertain to young Catholic converts in Protestant families, but I have a different situation. My family is atheist and blatantly hostile to Catholicism, to the point where they blame things like the Salem witch trials on Catholics and won't bother to listen to evidence to the contrary. And it isn't uncommon to be brushed off with comments of, "I don't care," when presented with solid evidence that they are wrong. In light of this open hostility, I am wondering if there's anything I can possibly do for the sake of converting them to the faith.
Well, yes, there's several things you could do. First, get a green scapular and put it in their house or houses. That's the first thing. But then you've got to remember that if God can't get through their free will, you certainly can't. Their bad free will. If he can't do it, you can't. You might try using their tactics on them. If they come up with anything against the church, I don't want to hear it. I don't care. So what? Give them a taste of their own medicine. That might or might not, help. It'll make you feel better anyway. And just disregard, and tell them, there's nothing I've got to say on the matter that you need to hear. So, I don't need to hear anything you've got to say. We'll just have to agree to disagree. My opinion means nothing to you. And guess what? It's back at you.
Wow. That's sad. That's sad that kind of attitude should happen within a family.
But it does. And there's not much you can do about it. I mean, all you can do, again, the green prayer, and give them their own back. If they don't like their own, if one of them dares to say to you, "Oh, well, I don't appreciate that." Well, yeah, neither do I. But what's to be said? You don't like it. I don't like it. We can either listen to each other or not. It's your call.
I like that. Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Timothy Martin. I am a Patreon member and enjoying the benefits of that immensely.
Yay!
Yeah. Remember, only
pizza.
$1 Patreon. I ask questions if they're decent automatically. So he says, "Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Coulombe. I know that he is a member of both the Royal Stewart Society and the Society of King Charles the Martyr, as I am.
I are.
I often find it difficult to find historical resources on the Royal House of Stewart without stark modernist Protestant bias. I'm wondering if Mr. Coulombe could recommend any good books or articles on the House of Stewart, Charles I, James II, James VII, and Jacobitism. Thank you."
I could. No. I will. I'll tell all. Yeah, there are several places you can. Firstly, there's a wonderful website called the Jacobite Heritage, which is done by a Canadian fellow from Toronto, whom I know, a very nice guy named McNeil. But the Jacobite Heritage is a good book. I mean, a good site. There was on Jacobitism to Charles Petrie, and also by Sir Compton Mackenzie. Those are two names for you. And then there was a remarkable series of historical novels covering the period roughly from Mary Queen of Scots all the way down to appearances by a woman named Jane Lane. And even though they were historical novels, they were terribly well researched and really worth your while in terms of reading. Murray Pittock, Pittock, The Invention of Scotland, things like that. Frank McLynn was a bit biased, but still. Those would do to start anyway.
Okay. Next question is from Nicholas Williams, another Patreon member. Another question for the magnificently schmaltzy Charles.
Well, what can you say? You know, on a day like April Fool's, when you think of all the other April Fool's days you spent with friends who aren't here any longer, friends you haven't made yet, it just feels so warm and comforting.
Okay. He asks, what is the origin and meaning behind the various liturgical colors? In particular, the rose or bubblegum vestments that we will see on Laetare Sunday. Whoa, bubblegum vestments.
Bubblegum, wow.
Okay.
Well, they arose gradually and were not the same everywhere in the Middle Ages. The Sarahite, for instance, used yellow for, I think, martyrs. Maybe not martyrs, they used yellow. And the Rite of Lyon, which the Curé d'Ars used, wore gray during Lent.
Huh. Okay.
But the colors that we have now were standardized in the Middle Ages, the later Middle Ages, certainly by the time of Trent. And they are white, which stands for purity and that sort of thing, and can be replaced by gold, not yellow, gold. And that's used for major feasts like Christmas and Easter. That's the color of rejoicing and joy. There's black, which is used for Requiem Masses and Good Friday. And don't be surprised, but it's the color of mourning. There's purple, which is used during Lent right now, Septuagesima event, and that is the color of sorrow, penance. Red, which is used for the Feasts of Martyrs, for the Masses of the Holy Ghost, and for the Feast of the Precious Blood. It represents either the fire of the Holy Ghost or the blood shed by our Lord of the Martyrs.
Mm.
There is green, which represents hope and springs eternal, and it's worn on Sundays after Pentecost and various other Feria days and so forth. And of course, it's always seen being worn by St. Patrick for some reason.
Weird.
I don't know.
Weird.
And then, in a few specially favored places, for feasts of Our Lady, and particularly the Immaculate Conception, there is blue. Light sky blue. Not deep blue like you see on the flag of Carillon. Sky blue. Azuleum, as they call it.
Mm.
And that's primarily in Spanish countries and territories that were once ruled by Spain,
like what?
The Philippines.
Mm. Okay.
So so those are the liturgical colors and what they mean.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I forgot the one you mentioned. Old rose.
Yes.
Not pink. Old rose, used only twice a year on Laetare Sunday in Lent and Gaudete Sunday in Advent. And that, too, is hope in the midst of penance and sorrow.
What's your favorite? Is that your favorite?
It's a toss-up between the blue and the rose, but yeah, I suppose
What blue?
primarily.
The Immaculate Conception blue?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I suppose it's they're my favorites simply because I see them so rarely.
Yeah.
Then after that, I would say red would be my favorite liturgical color.
Yeah.
Just because it's so striking.
It is. Okay, next question is from Jack Harwood. Pax Christi, gentlemen. It is me, your young gentleman follower, who seeks some comment on this. It has come to my attention that Pope Francis, who some claim to be an anti-pope, has not allowed a group of devout Catholics who he met in the Lateran to kiss his ring, most likely for the indulgence that is attached to it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. This, in a host of other problems, has given increased credence to the teachings of Yves Dupont. What is Charles's opinion on Dupont, and should we care about if Pope Francis is an anti-pope or not? You know, before you touch on this, I have to say that the not kissing of the ring, that reminds me of someone. You know, I think you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. Gone but not forgotten.
He's been in the news lately.
Really? Have they finally caught him?
Oh, yeah, you're in Austria. You don't know.
No.
Oh. Yeah,
What's
okay,
happened?
I guess this will be news to you. Cardinal Mahony is going to be talking at the Religious Education Conference in Los Angeles.
Oh, I knew that.
Oh, you did know that. Okay.
How is that news?
What?
How is that news?
Well, I thought Archbishop Gomez said you're done. I thought he was gone.
Yes, but then Pope Francis smacked him down and forced him to back down and apologize. And he did.
I didn't know that.
Okay. Now you know.
But, well, I guess it's surprising because is not Archbishop Gomez in charge of his own diocese? Because, I've seen Archbishop Gomez talk to Michael Voris while Michael Voris is covering the abuses of this conference.
That's correct.
So what's going on with Archbishop Gomez? I mean, what's happening
I don't
here?
know.
Oh, okay.
I'm not his spokesperson. Okay. And I would not, all I can tell you is that he quite rightly reacted to the revelations about Cardinal Mahony's collusion in the various crimes. He responded the way any normal, sane person would do, and was punished for it by the Holy Father.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And which brings us back to the Holy Father and his performance. The guy's very poorly bred. You know, he's a typical priest of his generation. They were brutal and nasty and rude. And he, apparently, at least in that film, he comes across as brutal, nasty, and rude. Not unlike so many priests of that age I remember when I was young. They were going to do things their way. It was all about them, not their office. Love me or to hell with you. Well, I understand he also, on that occasion, said Mass ad orientem.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, no. It's April Fool's.
It is
I don't
not.
Believe you. I don't
it's
believe
true.
You.
Look it up.
Why would he do that?
Well, I have a theory, which may or may not be true. You know how people of a liberal sort of mind are always saying Mass with your back to the people as a way of being offensive?
Really?
Yeah, that's what they say. It's quite possible. I mean, given the way he didn't want his ring kissed, it could be he said Mass ad orientem to show them what? I'm not even looking at you. So there. My back to you.
Because I
know you can't kiss my ring. I don't know.
He went nuts. He didn't went nuts, but I mean, verbally.
Oh, he looked a little cray-cray in that film.
But I was talking about when Cardinal Sarah suggested ad orientem. He, he sacked everyone other than Cardinal Sarah. That, almost as punishment, I guess. Like, okay, I'm going to surround you with all these liberals. Enjoy.
Yeah, well, he's a nice person, I guess.
Okay, so anyhow, I'm sorry for the going a little divergent here. So, should we care if Pope Francis is an anti-pope or not?
I wouldn't waste my time.
It doesn't bother you that there's a possibility he's an anti-pope?
Not in the slightest.
Is there a possibility? Maybe because you're not acknowledging that there's a possibility.
Well, I don't know. I'm not in a position to know.
You're a little dismissive, Charles.
No, I am dismissive. I think, you saw the way the Holy Father grabbed people's hands, but he wouldn't allow his to be kissed. I think had I been in that line and saw what was going on, I probably wouldn't have let him shake my hand. I'd just gawked at him.
Okay.
No, I wouldn't waste my time. I would focus on making sure you're in a worthwhile frame of spirit to receive communion worthily. I would pray for the man, offer my communions for him. But, it's not like there's anything other than that I can do to affect him anyway. What if he were an anti-pope? So what? Now what? What does that actually mean? And who's in a position to make that judgment? Not me.
Okay.
So, and honestly, the more you worry about it, the more you fret about it, the other one you damage is yourself. It certainly doesn't cause, I'm not accepting him as my pope. All right. Think he cares? You think he's going to wake up at night? Oh, Oswald Dupree in Columbia, South Carolina doesn't believe I'm pope. Oh, caring. So, I think he couldn't care less. And all you can do is the courtesy of returning the sentiment.
That's not true. You can write an open letter to Pope Francis. An open letter. An open and honest letter.
Let me tell you something. The Dubia didn't do it. Cardinal Merla's letters didn't. He didn't care.
That reminds me of a funny joke I saw on Twitter, where I guess the Pope declined this gentleman's invitation to be vegan for Lent, and one person on Twitter very wittily responded, "Congratulations to the young vegan for getting the Pope to respond."
Oh.
Because
you got an answer.
You got an answer. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's true.
Funny. Yeah.
It's true. So believe me, my opinion of whether or not he is our Pope means so little to him. I can't even imagine it's anywhere on his.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it.
Okay, don't worry about it. Okay, so what about the first half of the question? Let's hear about Yves Dupont and what's his situation?
Yves Dupont was a Frenchman resettled in Australia who wrote a book called Catholic Prophecy. It's a fascinating book. I read it many, many years ago. And thing of this sort, all I can say is, I don't know. We'll see.
What? Wait, about what?
Well, he had he set forth a set of prophecies culled from different saints' writings and so forth about the great monarch and what would happen at the end of time and so on.
Okay, so you could say at least it's in line with the tradition that the saints have laid down. It's not some,
no, it's
whack
not,
job.
He hasn't been getting interlocutions from Our Lady of Irwindale.
Okay.
The quarry, the blessed rocks in the quarry. No, I mean, I've read it, as I say, it's very interesting. Some of it I certainly hope comes to pass, but who's to say? I don't know.
Okay, that actually leads into a question from our next gentleman, Al Reddy. He says, since the 74th anniversary of Our Lady of All Nations is coming up, March 25th, I would like to hear both of your views on these apparitions, especially the term Our Lady who once was Mary.
Well,
I'm sorry, but I have to say this. When I hear that phrase, Our Lady who once was Mary, alarm bells start going off in my head. Just based on that.
That doesn't sound very good, to be honest with you. I really, And the truth of the matter is that the apparitions were condemned by the CDF no less than 3 occasions, before that by the Bishop of Amsterdam. Then a subsequent Bishop of Amsterdam said that it was all right to venerate her under the title, but the question of the supernatural nature of the messages was up for grabs. And the current Bishop of Amsterdam, who I understand is a very, most things pretty solid, he's in favor of them, but I don't know that his favoring them outweigh the condemnations of the CDF.
What's the CDF exactly?
The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Holy Office.
Okay.
Their condemnation in these things is generally about, that's it.
Yeah.
So, we have enough in the way of approved apparitions, like Fatima and Lourdes, La Salette, Guadalupe, and so on, so on, so on, Bagneux, Borang, Nac, Pontmain, Pédvoisin. It's amazing how many of them are French. I wonder why. Anyway, the point is, I just thought I'd get that in there. Some of us did go to the Table de Saint-Joseph. Anyway, as I was saying.
Yeah.
What?
No, it's fine. No, it's just some of that French snobbishness that Americans are so used to. No, it's okay, Charles. We're used to tolerating it. It's fine. It's fine.
All right, very good. Be that way. So, we all know that Italians are really French, but the the truth of the matter is that the large number of approved apparitions running around, particularly Fatima. When I've always said, and I got this from the late lamented Brother Leonard Mary, when I'm doing everything that I was asked to do at Fatima, then I can worry about these other things. So, it seems rather dodgy to me. It seems pretty well condemned, despite the feelings of the current bishop, who, as I say, is apparently a pretty good guy. So, I don't know. Okay. There you are.
Okay. Our last question today, from an anonymous gentleman or lady. Hello, Vincent and Charles. This message is going to be multiple questions, but can you talk a bit about the history of the Jesuits, such as what made them successful, why they were suppressed in the 1700s, and what the heck happened to them in the last century? For example, why were Aquinas and Suarez abandoned and replaced by Ronner and Teilhard de Chardin? Why did their focus shift from spiritual warfare to social justice and political activism, generally speaking?
Well, there's a book, which, although it has certain glaring errors, is worth your time in reading, called The Jesuits by the late lamented Father Malachi Martin, which provides a very famous book, and it provides a good introduction as to why they went the way they did. Why were they so successful? Well, 3 words: Saint Ignatius Loyola. He was a soldier, and he really imprinted his personality on the order he founded. And their ideal was that every Jesuit would be able to evangelize and create more Catholics, even if he were all by himself in total isolation. And that often happened to them. They were terribly well trained. The educational system was without par until they began to dismantle it in the late 50s. They were loyal to the Pope and to no earthly sovereign. And so that, to the late 18th century, the enmity of a lot of the Catholic sovereigns of Europe, who firstly, one by one, expelled them from their various domains, which was not a smart idea for a number of reasons. And then finally, they prevailed upon Pope Clement XIV to suppress them entirely. Interestingly, however, the order survived in Russia and Prussia because the Orthodox and Lutheran sovereigns of those countries refused to publish the papal decree. And it was through the order in those 2 countries that they maintained their lineage to the present. Then they were reestablished by Pius VII after the Napoleonic Wars. As to why they fell to pieces, well, 2 words: Pedro Arrupe.
Who is that?
The general of the Jesuits for most of the late 60s, early 70s. And he was responsible for transforming them. I mean, they'd already had their problems, but he really pushed it through. He was the great lover of Rahner and Teilhard. He was the one who put the finishing touches on the ruin of their educational system. Now, he had a very interesting story, and the interesting story was that he had been in Japan when the atom bomb was dropped, and he saw it dropped. And it really messed him up.
Wow.
Really messed him up. So he retooled the order with the help of a lot of other people from the spiritual warfare to fighting earthly. And that...
To fighting earthly what?
Injustice. And that basically, a lot of them becoming sort of pseudo-communists. So that's that.
Okay. So I guess the Aquinas and Suarez were abandoned. So were they abandoned in the 60s? Is that when the switch took place, or was it before then? Okay.
They always had problem children, of whom Rahner and Teilhard were at the top before the council. But and even in 1958, for instance, Rahner was in charge of editing the last edition of Denzinger, the great compendium of Catholic dogma.
I didn't need to know that. That's one of those things that's so... I can't believe that.
Well,
why did Denzinger allow that?
Well, Denzinger was dead. It was allowed by the Holy See.
That's unbelievable.
However, what you probably don't know is that both Rahner and Teilhard manned anti-aircraft guns during the Battle of Los Angeles.
No, okay, April Fools, Charles. No way. No way.
That was the beginning of that famous song, "Praise the Lord and Pass the Ammunition."
Oh, no.
Yes, they were singing it while they were firing away at the flying saucers over L.A. You had Rahner firing, and Teilhard was feeding the shells into the gun.
What an image.
Yeah, I think so. You've got the aliens firing their phasers, whatever it is, at the city. You got these 2 guys at the guns, each of them with those sort of World War I style American helmets, that the National Guard would have had, and they're firing away. Teilhard feeding the bullets into the machine gun. Yep. That's how it happened.
Okay. You're not going to break me. This isn't going to be Churchill Part 2. Okay.
Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Praise the Lord and swing into position. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition, and we'll all stay free. Yep.
Okay. Time for our book. Saved by the Bell.
You came close.
Okay. Our book today is Fire of Love by St. Catherine of Genoa, not to be confused with St. Catherine of Siena.
No, different people.
This is a powerful little book, very small, 91 pages, but it has some very powerful stuff. As you can see, it says Understanding Purgatory. She was kind of a mystic, and she had some insights into, I guess she experienced purgatory, and her descriptions, they're very interesting because I think it's sort of hard to make real some of the things of purgatory, but she did her best. And the most powerful for me, the instance. Well, actually, I guess I should give some background first to show you how she's heroic and epic and saintly. She worked in a hospital taking care of people who were dying of the plague in 1493 in Genoa. And apparently 4/5 of the citizens who remained in Genoa that year died. And she stayed in the hospital. And she ended up dying 17 years later, but and her body actually is now incorrupt. But can you imagine that? 4 out of every 5 people are dying in that city that year of disease, and then you stay. And not only do you stay, but you work in the hospital.
Ugh.
Talk about unfathomable heroism of the saints. That's unbelievable. So, anyhow, this is the book from a person of that sort. And I will just give you my favorite metaphor in the book in terms of how she tried to make purgatory real and to make us understand it. She used a metaphor. She said, imagine you are absolutely starving. You are wasting away. There is an endless hunger in you for food. And you know, in some distant land, some very, very far away distant land, there is a loaf of bread that will completely and utterly and totally satisfy your hunger. She says the difference between purgatory and hell is that in purgatory, over some period of time, eventually, one day, maybe 1 year from now, maybe 100 years from now, you will get to that bread. Hell is you will never get to that bread. You have no hope of getting it. You will never get that bread. You will be endlessly hungry, and there will be no satisfaction. And that will be your story for the rest of eternity. I thought that was unbelievably powerful.
Well said.
So, yeah. So get this book, TumblerHouse.com. Just a plug to TumblerHouse.com. We have over 700 books in our bookstore. Free shipping on orders over $25. So for most orders, if you're getting 2 books, you get free shipping. I generally ship the same day. That'll do it. That'll do it for this episode. Any closing words, Charles?
Well, yes. Yes, there are. Several, in fact. To all of my friends out there in television land, bear in mind that if you're not old enough to have seen the Beverly Hillbillies or Father Knows Best when they were first run, too bad. So sad. You wanted something more enlightening than that?
What is this in relation to? What's going on, Charles?
What do you mean, what's going on? What day is it today?
It's April Fool's.
There you go. Now, what kind of a farewell could I give on April Fool's with something totally erroneous?
Okay, well, there you go.
Seriously, though, remember, ladies and gentlemen, that despite it being April Fool's Day, we are still in the middle of Lent. We're continuing to creak along until we get to Holy Week and Easter. I hate to say this, and I may lose my trad card, but be kind. Be kind, ladies and gentlemen. Holy Week is coming up, when the whole church, in all of its different rites, jumps into the horrors and terrors of that last. The resurrection comes after, but we have a lot to do before then. Or, in the immortal words of Dr. Van Helsing in Dracula, we must pass through dark waters before we reach the sweet. I can't think of a better description of Holy Week.
Okay. Thank you for stopping by today, and we'll see you next time, ladies and gentlemen. Take care.
Well, bye-bye.